We now continue with chapter 4 of the Steinsaltz Tanya on page number 75. If you don't have the Steinsaltz Tanya, you could use Lessons in Tanya, number 3, Shayich V'Amuna, and it starts on page 858. L'chaim, l'chaim. Okay, chapter 4. The Alter Rebbe asked a question, and the question is that the sun brings forth rays, and when the rays go out of the sun, then the rays feel like an independent entity. And therefore, even though God created the world, he gave us the ability to feel like independent entities, and therefore we have free choice, and we're able to choose to do good over bad. However, he concludes by saying that this parable is incomplete, because when we talk about the rays of the sun coming out of the sun is in one location, and the rays come out of the sun, they are in a different location. However, when you talk about the human being, when you talk about creation, being that God is everywhere, there's no place for us to be outside of God. If there's no place for us to be outside of God, how is it possible then that we should be considered independent entities and feel that we have this free choice? We're now continuing on page 75, chapter 4. Okay. I believe this chapter is one of the most fundamental chapters in the entire Tanya and in the entire teachings of Kabbalah and Chassidus. I also would like to suggest that outside of the class, that you read these chapters on your own with all the commentaries and the details, and this way one will have a greater appreciation of the Tanya share. Also, if you have any questions during the week, please send them. I would love to hear from you, and perhaps we could, with God's help, discuss it in the following class. Okay. It says in the book of Tehillim, a book of Psalms, like King David, for the Lord, which is Havaya, God, and Elikim, is like the sun and the shield. In this chapter, the Alter Rebbe teaches us the two basic names of God. And these two names, how they are pronounced, what they mean, and their function. And this is all based on one verse, a verse in Tehillim, and that is that the sun and the shield of the sun represent these two names of God. The first name of God is the four-letter name of God, the Tetragrammaton, which we call Havaya. Havaya is really using these four letters and rearranging the permutation of these four letters. And by doing so, we are not, God forbid, pronouncing God's holy, ineffable name. And then the second name of God, Elokim, instead of using the letter Hey, we put a Kuf, and therefore we mispronounce the name. But this way, we know what name we are talking about. Page 76. Peter's Mogain, what is the meaning of shield? Not to take Lashemesh Lahagein, Shyuch Labrius, the Savla. Kamaim Rabbi Sinuzal, Asad Love, Kalibarhu, Moiti Hama, Menartika. The Shoyim, the Doidimba, Moi, Shanat take Mogain Bada Shemesh, Kachshem Alikim, Negin, the Shemavaya Baruch. To translate, the word shield refers to a sheath around the sun to protect the creatures of this world so that they can bear the power and the heat of the sun. As a rabbi stated, in the world to come, the Holy One, blessed be He, will remove the sun from its sheath. The wicked will be punished by it, just as the sheath shields us from the sun, so too the divine name of Elikim shields us from the name of Havayah. Now it's interesting to note that here he says, what will be the punishment in the world to come for the Rishayim, the wicked people? They are going to be burned by the sun. What does that mean? God could be abusive. And therefore, when you go out into the sun, even today, we know that to protect yourself from the sun, you need sunglasses, you need sun shield, you need clothing. If not, God forbid, you can get burned by the sun. So the sun, in essence, is good. It's a provider, it's a giver, it's a benefactor, it's love, it's kindness. However, we need to be a proper vessel to receive the light of the sun. So if we're prepared by wearing all of this sun protection and sunblock and sunglasses and clothing, we can walk out into the sun, see the light of the sun, enjoy the warmth of the sun, and really see how all of the vegetation grows and the flowers color, etc., etc. What are the garments? What are the garments of the soul? The garments of the soul are Torah and mitzvahs. Every day we get up in the morning and we say Moedani, we wash our hands, negel vasher, we give tzedakah, we put on tefillin, we say Shema, we learn Torah. By doing these things every day, this is the way that we create garments for the soul, and therefore we have the ability to appreciate the soul. But if, God forbid, we lack these garments, God doesn't punish us. He simply allows us to stand before the sun. And therefore the sun, in its own way, will bring this tremendous heat upon the soul of the wicked. This answers a very famous story, and we said it in the past, of Rabbi Elazar ben Dudaya. The Gemara says, on one hand, he was called Rabbi, Elazar ben Dudaya, but yet when the Gemara describes who he was very far from a rabbi. He was a person that all his life had tremendous desire for harlots, and he would go from place to place, from city to city, and find every harlot under the sun. Once he heard about this amazing harlot who was very, very expensive somewhere far away, and he saved a lot of money, he traveled and he came there, and the harlot said something to him and insulted him. That was a paradigm shift in his life. He realized that everything, all the money he spent, all the pleasures he had was worthless. And he went outside and he began to cry. And he cried so much that his soul left his body, he died. As he was crying, he was doing tshuva. He regretted his past. The Talmud says, a heavenly voice comes forth and says, Rabbi Elazar ben Dudaya has a place in the world to come. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the author of the Mishnah, heard this story, and it says, Bacha, he began to cry. Why did he cry? He said, wow, look at this. There are people in this world that can acquire the world to come in 1 hour, in one deed. This whole person, Rabbi Elazar ben Dudaya, his entire life was dedicated to nonsense and depravity and frivolity. And yet, before he dies, he cries a little bit and he regrets it. And all of a sudden, he gets this big, giant place in the world to come. And then there are people all their life, every day, they're struggling and they're working to do Torah and mitzvahs, and they're lucky, they'll get a place in the world to come. Bacha Rebbe's crying. What is really happening over here? The Rebbe introduces a very beautiful insight from the Arizal. He says that Isaac Luria, the great Kabbalist, who wrote a book on reincarnation, explains the story. Rabbi Elazar ben Dedaya says like this. Arizal says like this. Rabbi Elazar ben Dedaya, even though he did tshuva, he regretted his past. So God said, fine, I will clean your slate. You have no sin. Okay. But there's a problem. The problem is, how do you go into paradise? To enter into paradise, you need some merits. You need garments. You need mitzvahs. Because paradise is this amazing sun. Paradise is 310 worlds of pleasure, but it's a sun. It's Shem Havaya. It's a revelation of God's name. And therefore, if you go into paradise and you're not prepared, you're going to burn. So how does Rabbi Elazar ben Dedaya acquire a place in the world to come? Says that Arizal, Isaac Luria, he says it's very simple. You see, Rabbi Elazar ben Dedaya was a reincarnation of Rabbi Yochanan Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Yochanan Kohen Gadol was a high priest in the Second Holy Temple for 80 years. Now, to be a high priest for 1 year is a miracle, because on Yom Kippur, when you go into the Holy of Holies and you are unworthy, you have a sin, you're going to die that year. Now, so if he lived for 80 years, means he was 80 years without sin. Yet, at the last moment of his life, he had a doubt. He had doubts in his faith, and he became a heretic. And because he became a heretic, he lost his place in the world to come. His soul was now reincarnated into Rabbi Elazar ben Dedaya. For 80 years, he followed his heart's desires. He sinned. He followed his lusts. And right before he dies, he does tshuva. It's a reverse, a total reversal. Now, he acquires all the mitzvahs, all the good deeds of Rabbi Yochanan Kohen Gadol, and he's able to enter into paradise. So what do you see? You see here that there's two aspects. There's the aspect of not sinning. Yeah, I don't sin. I don't do bad things. I don't hurt people. I don't kill. I don't steal. I don't embarrass. Very nice. Why do I have to follow the Torah? What's the reason? I don't hurt anybody. I'm a good person. The answer is, if you don't follow the Torah, you're going to be in limbo. You won't go to hell, but you won't go to paradise. The soul is going to be flying around in no man's land, which is the worst, by the way. It has no rest. The soul needs to rest in peace. If the soul doesn't go into paradise, it doesn't go into hell, it's a problem. In Hasidus and Kabbalah, it says that the soul says, it's worth it for me to go to hell so that I should go to paradise. Because to go nowhere, to have no identity, is worse than anything. So the soul says, I'd rather go into Gehenna, into purgatory, and cleanse for the mistakes of the past. And now I will be allowed entrance into paradise. So this is the secret. This is a hint. Alter Rebbe says over here, in these few lines, that you should know that the sun is Shem Havaya. The sun is the name of God, the tetragrammaton, the ineffable name of God. And this is tremendous energy, tremendous light, tremendous power. And therefore, by doing mitzvahs, by lighting Shabbos candles, by giving tzedakah, this is the way we acquire garments to enter into this amazing place, which is called Gan Eden, and really is alluding to the world to come after Mashiach comes. However, he says, in order to do this, we need these garments, we need this shield, which is the name of Elohim, to protect us from this light. And now he gives a very powerful insight, which is universal in the sense that this is the basis of all Hasidus and Kabbalah for all times. These two names of God is used over and over again. So if you have an understanding of these two names of God, you can appreciate the rest of Hasidus. If not, you're stuck. The Shem Havaya, Pirushoy Shemahavis Hakoy Ma'in Liyesh. The Shem of Havaya denotes that God brings everything forth from nothing into something, from nothingness into existence. That's Shem Havaya. Why? What is the meaning of Shem Havaya? Vayud mishameshes ala pu'ula shehi b'lashon hayve v'samid k'perish Rashi al pasuk al-chayasit iyuv kol hayamim. Now the Alter Rebbe explains the literal translation of God's name. What does it mean to be God? What does it mean Shem Havaya? So he says, the general root of Havaya is Hove. Hove. Hove means what? To create. Hove means the present. Hoya is the past. Hove is present. Hiya is the future. And in truth, all of these three names are in the name of Havaya. It's part of the permutation. But the way God's name is written out plain, without moving around the letters, it is Yud Hove. Hove means the present. God is now creating the present. Ex nihilo, from nothing into something. As we spoke earlier in chapter 1 of Shayich V'Amunah. The Yud, the letter Yud in front of a word, represents continuity. In other words, God is recreating the world every moment anew. That is the definition of Shem Havaya, of God's name. A similar example is actually the name Yehudi, a Jew. What does it mean to be a Jew? I'm a Jew. I'm a Yehudi. What does it mean? Same concept. The letter Yud and Hod. That is the name of Jew. Jew means Hod with the letter Yud. Hod is praise. Who is a Jew? What is a Jew? A person that praises God always. Hod means praise. Put the Yud before Hod, Yehudi, and you have the definition of a Jew. One who praises God 24/7. We say this in the Amidah every day. Ata kadosh v'shimcha kadosh. You, God, you are holy, and your name is holy. Ukadoshim b'chol yoyim yahalelu chasal. And those that are holy praise you all the time. Who are those people who are praising you all the time? The angels only praise God 3 times a day. They say kadosh, 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 3 times a day. Who is praising God all day? Us. The soul of every Jew is praising God all day long, 24/7. And therefore, when the Jew comes along and says, I don't believe in God, it's a baba meiser. What do you mean you don't believe in God? Your soul sees God. If you can go into your brain and see a neshama, you would know that your soul is praising God 24/7. And this praise needs to be actualized through Torah and mitzvahs. But what is the meaning of Yehudi? One who praises God. A thought that I had a while ago, a long time ago. It's interesting that his name should be erased forever, and he should burn in hell forever. Hitler Yamach Shemoy. What did he do? He made every Jew put on their hands a symbol that said Judah. Now, he wanted to extinguish the flame of the Jew, but he didn't realize, in truth, he was fanning the flames, because he was telling every single Jew, you should know you are Yehudi. What are you? By definition, you are praising God 24/7. And therefore, no matter what I do to you, no matter what I have planned to do for you, it's not going to help, because the soul of a Jew is eternal. And therefore, by having that word Judah on our arms, that gave us more strength. That says if a person falls into a state of faint. You call them by their name. When you call them by their name, you wake them up. The proof is you have a big crowd of people. Call out the name. Hey, Avraham. Oh, all Avrahams are going to turn around. Call out Yitzchak. They'll turn around. Sarah, turn around. So what does Yehudi mean? Yehudi is our essence. And that is that we are praising God all the time, 24/7. So this is the similarity between God and the Jew, because we are a part of God. We have a chelik al-kam mamish, we have a soul inside of us. And this soul that we have inside of us, because it's part of God, is constantly calling upon God. And that's the meaning of Yehudi, which is the same idea of God's name, Shem Havaya. And that is why in the first letter of the Aleph base, which is the letter Aleph, we have this connection. What is Aleph? The Alter Rebbe once said, an Aleph is a pintel von oibin, und a pintel von untin, und a kavir shemayim biemsa. What is the Aleph? It's a dot on the top, a dot on the bottom. The dot on the top is the letter Yud, the Yud of the Yud Kei Vav Kei of God's name. The dot on the bottom is the Yud of Yehudi, of a Yid. So these two Yuds connect together. How? By the letter Vav. When we accept the yoke of God, when we study God's Torah, that's the way we become one with Him. So this is the message over here of the Yud before the name of God and the Yud before the name of a Yid, of a Jew. Page 77. What does that mean? And this refers to the life force that is flowing literally every moment within all the creations, from that which emanates from God's mouth and His breath, bringing them forth from nothingness into existence every moment, since their creation during the 6 days of creation is not sufficient to sustain their existence, as stated above. So now that we established that the name of Havaya means our existence, how God creates the world every moment, and showing that God is concerned about us and loves about us, and He needs us and He wants us every moment. It's not like a friend who calls you once a year on your birthday, or your mother who calls you for dinner. God is literally thinking about every single one of you every moment. Now we say in the davening, in our prayers, when we praise God and we thank Him for everything He gives us, for life, for sustenance, for success, we say in the davening, in the Amidah, we call God, number one, page 78, the great one. And we call Him Hagiba, the strong one. What does that mean? The great one is really a metaphor and refers to the attribute of chesed, kindness, and the expansion of life force into all the world and creations without limits, so they may be created from nothingness and brought forth into existence and sustained through the gratuitous kindness. It is referred to as great because it stems from the vastness of the Holy One, blessed be He Himself in all His glory. So why do you call God great? Because God is kind and God creates the world every moment anew. God is great and His greatness is unfathomable. Because God's greatness is unfathomable. And what does that mean? We cannot comprehend it. In other words, how can we comprehend that God is recreating every object, every creature, every creation, every moment, every rock, every turtle, every fish, every bird, every car, every house, every human, every Yid, every man, every woman, every minute. You could really understand this. We have enough difficulty thinking about ourselves. What we're doing today, what we're doing tomorrow. And yet God is thinking about every single one of us. Why is that so? Because God is the nature of good. And since the nature of good is to bestow goodness and kindness, and just like this attribute of chesed, of kindness, of greatness, is a praise of the Holy One, blessed to be, and exclusively, as no creature has the ability to create an entity from nothingness and sustain it. There's nothing in the world, there's no person in the world that can create ex nihilo, nothing into something. Only God. And this attribute, to understand what it means to create something into nothing, in truth, is beyond our comprehension. We have no idea what that means. Yes, easy to say, yeah, God creates, the word ex nihilo sounds very fancy. Or from nothing into something. Okay, it sounds more plain. But what does that really mean? It's like turning on an electric switch and electric current is going into a light bulb and giving you light. Do you have any idea what that means, really? What's the definition of electricity, how it works? Some people may have some sort of a comprehension of what it means. But the comprehension of ex nihilo is totally something which is beyond our comprehension.
So what is Raza Dereta?
Give me a minute. Let me finish and then we'll ask questions. Give me 2 more minutes. So he goes on to say, what's the point he's saying over here? Just like we don't understand what it means for God to create the world every moment anew, we don't understand what it means for God to create this shield of the sun to protect us from this heat. As he goes on to say, page 80, for this idea to create ex nihilo is in God's greatness. And God and his midos and his attributes are a perfect unity. As it says in the Zohar that he and his attributes are one. Now this is the punchline. And just like we cannot comprehend God, we don't have the intellect whatsoever or the capacity to comprehend the Creator, so too we cannot comprehend his attributes. Page 82. This is the punchline. And just like no created intellect whatsoever has the capacity to comprehend God's greatness, which is the ability to create an entity from nothingness and sustain it every moment anew. As it's written, the world is built with kindness. So too, it literally does not have the capacity to comprehend the attribute of Gevura, which is restraint of the Holy One, blessed be He. Shehi midas Tzimzum, umanias, spashus achayus, midulasai, miliated, los galis, al nevrayim, lachiyesel, mekaimam, megilui, kiyim behestapon. Just like we cannot comprehend God's greatness, which is created with ex nihilo, we cannot comprehend the attribute of constriction and restraint of the expansion of the life force that stems from his attribute of greatness, preventing it from descending and becoming manifest in the creations, granting them life and sustaining them openly, but rather with a concealed countenance. Shachayis, page 84, because this life force is concealed in the body of the creation. Because why? Giving the appearance that the body of the creation is an independent entity and is not merely the expansion of the life force and spirit, analogous to the diffusion of the sun's rays of light, but rather it is an independent entity. This is what he says over here. This is the Chiddush. And that is that just like you cannot understand God's kindness, creating ex nihilo, we cannot understand God's power of Tzimzum, God's power of contraction, and his power of restraint. And therefore, the best example that the Alter Rebbe can find to give us a little bit of an insight to the whole secret of creation is the secret of the sun and the rays of the sun that come out of the sun. Because once the rays are in the sun, they become nullified to the sun. And therefore, he makes this point very clear that really we are in the sun, yet we are able to feel as we are an independent entity. How? The answer is very simple. Shem Elikim, the name of God. But what does that mean? He says, you're right. You cannot comprehend it. It's impossible. And just like you cannot comprehend, what does it mean God can create the world every moment anew? Just like you cannot comprehend that, you cannot comprehend this. But this is the reality. Because the sun and its shield represent the two names of God. Let's just finish up a few more lines, and then we'll open up for questions. Page 86. And this cannot be comprehended by the intellect of any creation. The essence of the constriction and concealment of the life force, and how nevertheless the substance of the creation is created from nothingness and brought into something or into existence. Just as there is no created being whose intellect has the capacity to comprehend the essential nature of creation from nothingness. So this is the end of today's class. Next week, we're going to discuss this bracket, which is an amazing bracket, the second part of chapter 4, which has tremendous insight and secrets. And God willing, we're going to open up that for next week. In the interim, the point of today's class is that there are two names, Havai, Elikim. Havai creates the world every moment anew. Elikim is the name of Tzimzum, the name of contraction, which is, by the way, why, if you open up the 5 books of Moses, you open up the Torah, the book of creation, what does it say? Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created the world with the name of Elikim, not with the name of Havai. Why? Because for a world to be created, that it should feel as if the world itself is independent, to see the physical and to see every reality of creation is only through Shem Elikim. Without Shem Elikim, there'd be no world. You wouldn't see it. You would only see God. So therefore, when the Torah begins the story of creation, it says, when God created the world, it was created Bereshis Bar Elikim. It was created with the name of Elikim. And now we have the pleasure and we have the free will to see every created entity that God brought forth in creation.